Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I hope that you're doing well today. I see that there's about 40 people online right now listening in, and I'm so excited to be able to help facilitate the new normal. So I will introduce myself first, and then we'll let our speakers introduce themselves in just a moment. In case you don't already know me, my name is Daniel Gannon. I'm one of the associate deans here for SNOOS Global Campus, and I am a proud member of the Diversity Council. It's been a really excellent year as a member, and this is one of the first events that I've helped to facilitate, so it's excited to kind of be a part of this now too. And without further ado, I'll let our three speakers today introduce themselves. If I can go to the next slide here. There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fariel. I work as a career advisor. I work remotely from Los Angeles. I've been with SNU for about 6 years now, and I'm also a member of the Diversity Committee. And outside of work, I'm busy with my husband, son, and riding my Peloton.
Nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Thomas. I've been with SNHU for about 7 years now. I work as a regional director for military initiatives in our marketing department. And unfortunately, I got rid of my Fit Desk. This is especially for Fariel, right before the pandemic took place, because I said, oh, I don't need this anymore. I travel all the time for work, and now I'm confined to my desk. So I am jealous that you have a Peloton, and now I need to invest. So nice to meet everyone, and I hope you enjoy today's show.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Larry Shane. I've been with SNU for a little more than 4 years now. I started out in financial aid, and now I'm up in career as a career outreach specialist. I have my spare time. I do a lot of, try to do a lot of exercising, walking, stay in some decent shape, especially given the current circumstances. I have 2 grandsons that help me continue to chase, and we have a wonderful golden retriever named Bella, who keeps us on our toes and active as well. And my goal in life is to single-handedly defeat age discrimination. So tall order, but a good, proper endeavor, a good thing to go for.
I think you're doing a pretty good job so far, Larry. And before we go forward, I do just want to mention that what's really interesting about all 3 of our panelists today is at one point or another, each of them has been in career, because Kendra, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've worked in that department as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got some professionally minded folks here, and I'm really, really excited. Let me move on to the next slide here just to discuss the agenda. So we're going to be discussing today what the new normal is, and I'm kind of saying that that's our personal narrative, and Larry, Fariel, and Kendra all have, as well as I and everyone else, all have a very different personal narrative for what has happened to our lives since Corona has really taken over the way that the normal world now operates. And there's been a lot of other changes in society too. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement, major social unrest in our country, and we're also moving into the election season and what's a pretty turbulent time. Where there's a lot of polarization going on. So the way that we operate is not the same as it was 6 months ago. And so we'll talk a bit about that. Fariel's going to go a bit more in depth than any of the rest of us to discuss some of her new normal, and I'm really excited for her to be able to share that. We're going to have a group panel where Larry, Kendra, and Fariel will all answer a few questions about that for themselves, and then we'll have a Q&A. So if you've got any questions, I'm not great at monitoring the chat and talking at the same time, so either feel free to type them in, but also bring it up again once we get to the Q&A, and feel free to come off mute at that point and just speak up, and we'll all be happy to chat with you. And we'll end with a call to action. So before we jump into too much further again, I do think it's important for us to talk a little bit about how this all came to fruition. So back in April, it was Easter, Ramadan, and Passover all within the same couple of days. And Fariel and I were connecting over this because I'm marrying into a Jewish family, and we practice Passover in our house. I'm living with my in-laws right now. I'm not Jewish, and it was a really interesting experience for me. It's become my favorite holiday over the last few years, but we were talking about how our faith-based practices had changed pretty substantially from meeting together in person to figuring out how to be innovative and still connect with our family. And I had thought that we were being innovative by having like Zoom calls for Passover with our family, and Fariel took it to a whole nother level. So it was, Fariel, I know you're going to talk about that in just a moment, but I think it was really interesting and fascinating to see how Fariel, who's really much more of a practicing faith practitioner than I am, really was innovative in discovering how to expand her community there. And then we discussed what's really changed since then and how our faith-based practices have both kind of been adjusted over the last few months, and why we're here today talking about how that impacts us as individuals, both in and out of the workplace. And Fariel, if you have anything else you want to add before we jump into your slides, we can, but otherwise I'm more than happy to let you take it away and be your slide Sherpa.
Sure, let's go ahead and jump in.
Okay.
Okay, great. So this was basically my inspiration. So, for those of you who know or don't know, that California is really one of the first states to kind of lock down and quarantine, due to the pandemic, what was happening. And the public health department released this graphic that I'd seen because, as Dan said, many of the holidays were in April. So, and at the beginning of April, end of March, we kind of shut down. So when I saw this, I started thinking, okay, how am I going to celebrate my tradition from home? So next slide. Okay, so just a little background for those of you who don't know what Ramadan is. It's the 9th month of the Muslim calendar. Every year, millions of Muslims around the world, they fast for 30 days. So no food, no water from sunrise until the evening. The reason for this is the health benefits. I would say it's a more intense version of intermittent fasting. Feeling the hunger that a lot of less fortunate people have. It's like a reminder of all of the blessings we do have, self-discipline, and believe it or not, it's something we look forward to. I know people always ask me this must be really challenging, but it's something that you're really excited about because it's also spiritual reformation as well. And the word Ramadan literally translates to burn because it's a month of improving your moral character and improving your day-to-day life. So in 2021, Ramadan will also be in April to May, and we go by lunar calendar, so it moves up about 12 days every year. Next. Okay, good. So what's the normal, month look like? So it's 30 days of, going to your local mosque if you have one, or with your family, friends, community, breaking fast together, doing a lot of interfaith, inviting different congregations to break fast with your neighbors, and you see friends normally that you don't see throughout the year. So this year it was essentially breaking fast with your immediate family, a roommate if you had one, or alone. And that's why I feel like was the hardest part, checking on my friends who do live alone. You don't have that community there, you're by yourself. Another challenge was cooking for yourself for all 30 nights. I know for me and my husband, this was a hard thing because it's not just about cooking dinner, it's about how do I cook something that's going to nourish me for the next day? So I kind of put YouTube to the rescue because it really did. This is the millennial in me. You'll see that. Going to social media, trying to find, recipes and trying to be innovative and, cook healthy meals for my family. A huge challenge that really impacted not only my community, but I would say all Americans, is losing their jobs and then seeing that people cannot afford to break their fast. They don't have money for food, and especially small businesses that really didn't get any stimulus checks or anything. So as you can see from the pictures, a lot of the mosques started to drive through iftars where they would take boxes of food and just people would drive through, whether they're part of the congregation or not, just giving it to them. Okay, so another tradition is when you go to your local mosque, you pray in congregation with your community, you listen to a sermon by a sheikh, and a sheikh or imam is someone who's actually studied in a seminary for about 10 years. And a lot of the sermons relate to improving yourself, your community, the benefits of the month, being able to catch up with your family and friends, and really meeting new people, introducing them to the community. So the new normal really shifted that. It turned into praying with whoever you live, or again, alone. And the alone part, I feel like, has been really, really, I feel like the most difficult part for a lot of people. So again, the millennial me. So a local sheikh that I know reached out to a few friends of mine and said, what do you guys think about live streaming? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. So one of my friends created this graphic, and we started doing regular live streaming where there'd be like a local, like a lecture, a Q&A, people being able to ask for prayers in real time. So a lot of people being able to say, hey, my relative has COVID, please pray for them. Having like a fun little quiz via Slido, asking people, what do you miss the most? How can we support you on this virtual platform? And then what was really interesting is, we kind of assumed this was just going to be a West Coast thing. And we started seeing people tuning in internationally, which was really cool. And then having fun with it. And what I mean by that is, when we asked, like, what prayers do you have? We were expecting, a lot of like, heavy things. And then someone wrote once, can you pray for the stock market? Because my stocks are really going down, which I thought was really fun. Okay, so another tradition for this month is it's highly recommended to do community service and give charity. And again, this is something that you should do throughout the year, but especially in this month. So whether it's locally volunteering, a lot of people I know in my house, we have like a little jar, we call it sadaqah, which is charity. And, you put money in it every night and you try to, give it to a local cause. But again, this year, we couldn't do really that. So we decided on doing a virtual charity event. So one thing, and I had mentioned this in the previous slide, is we kind of had a global presence through the live streaming. So we saw a lot of Canadians coming on and introducing themselves. So we decided to have like a friendly competition. We picked 3 things that we thought were really important. So we decided to pick 3 projects: food aid, orphans, and widows empowerment. And we decided to say, hey, let's have a competition, who can raise the most? Of course, Team USA. And it was interesting because although the Americans, we raised more money, more Canadians donated, which I thought was interesting. So that was a really cool thing we were able to do. We also had virtual competitions. So of course, that's my son. For those of you who don't know, he has to be in everything that every presentation that I do. So we did a food in the Quran. What are some foods that are in the Quran? And then also, what do you break your fast with? Connecting through the Quran, through art. What are some themes? So one thing that was really cool was this was originally for young kids and teenagers because we felt like, okay, they probably need it most. And then we started getting emails from adults saying, hey, we want to do it too. So we took off the age limit. Larry, you'll probably appreciate this. And we're like, listen, anyone from any age can participate. And what was really cool is we started getting a global presence. We got submissions from the US, Canada, India, Kenya, Tanzania. And it was so awesome to be able to connect with the community on a global presence. So at the end of the month, there is a holiday. It's called Eid al-Fitr, which translates to the Feast of Fast Breaking. So for this holiday, a lot of people, they go out to their local stores, they buy new clothes, you go in to your local mosque, pray as a congregation, visit, call, text family, give gifts, and also charity as well. So we did this time was a drive-through Eid. So like cars would come up with their kids and, you'd give them gifts and breakfast and just wave and honk your horn and all of this. And I thought this was a cute little graphic someone made where like, celebrate Eid, but, don't forget your mask and hand sanitizer. So I'm going to segue into Black Lives Matter. When the murder of George Floyd happened, something within my community that I saw that was immediate, because everyone was using technology, was things were happening in real time. So immediately, this is my local sheikh, my local scholar. He gave a Friday sermon on solidarity with Black Americans. I started getting flyers, webinars, classes, book clubs within the Muslim community on, standing with the community. And I really liked the message that was being sent. And then also a lot of it was going back on us. what microaggressions do you have? What are you doing? What are you doing to welcome people into the community? What biases do you have? You need to reflect on those and solve those first before you can go and kind of solve things within the community. And then, I live in Simi Valley, California. So for those of you who don't know, this was actually the city where they found the police officers not guilty in the Rodney King beating. So after our local sheikh had this talk and was talking about the importance of standing with the Black community, the Muslim community within Simi Valley were present. They were, and you can see this is my friend. She's there. She's socially distancing, but standing in solidarity. And at the very least, he encouraged us to at least drive by, show your support, which I thought was really, really important. And we actually had 5,000 people from Simi Valley. It was the biggest protest in our history, just to stand up and say, this is wrong, and we're against this. And I just wanted to end with some personal takeaways. So although I was really, I was down before the month of Ramadan started because, I felt like really isolated, but something beautiful happened where I felt connected globally, and I was able to meet people virtually that, I would have never met otherwise. I also felt like I could focus more at home. I have a very active 4-year-old. So I was able to, take him to his playroom while I listened to a lecture and pray on my own. I felt closer as a family unit. My son was really excited about helping us prepare iftar, breaking our fast, pray, trying to join in and pray with us. And then, as I mentioned before, being able to discuss things in real time instead of waiting till the next week till you went to your local mosque. It was like, hey, we're having a webinar now, we're having a training right now, we're having a book club now, be part of it. And then being able to utilize your creativity, whether it was art, poetry, other forms.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get off mute. Before we go to the panelist questions, I'm going to go back to the last slide for a moment, just because first off, thank you, Fariel, for putting together those slides. They were really lovely. I love the pictures of your son, especially now that I've met him a few times in our team chats. Before we go into these panelist questions, I just want to say that I also had a few takeaways. I've reviewed Fariel's slides, and I think we'll probably discuss each of these points again in the panelist questions with their opportunities to answer. But really what this started from, again, the fruition was about the changes to our faith-based practices, and then what else has happened in the last few months that I think has been really highlighted with Fariel's presentation is that this was a time for us to reflect on practices that we might not otherwise have implemented. The way that we've connected with people that we never would have had the opportunity to do in the past is amazing, just because it wouldn't have happened in the way that it did. And we're engaging with each other in new ways that I find really powerful. The other thing that I wanted to note, especially as it pertains to Fariel's slide on Black Lives Matter, that I think is powerful, that might not have happened if not for happening at simultaneous to the pandemic, is that we're organizing and connecting in new ways that are really meaningful, because so many people are not at work and people are near their computers and able to connect immediately in live time. We're able to make some pretty substantial changes with a lot more immediacy than we might be able to otherwise. Those are just things that I'm already thinking about, and I'm excited to dive into these questions. So I will move forward now. So the first question, and this is popcorn style, so Larry, Fariel, and Kendra, just as a reminder, any of you can feel free to take this away, and then everyone can chime in as we go along. But I am curious, just personally, and they obviously don't have to be faith-based, but what are some of the most significant changes that have happened to your life in recent months with COVID-19 and the recent growth of Black Lives Matter, as well as anything else that might be going on that you feel is significant, which I haven't listed here?
Hey, Daniel, I wanted to say that I certainly agree with you that I think that because the pandemic happened, we're able to shine a light on issues regarding race that have been going on for countless years. And for me, the most significant change to my life is working towards being fearless in sharing how I feel. Typically what I've done in the past is I would have conversations about race within my household or with other Black people. Because they automatically understood where I was coming from. There wouldn't be any pushback of, well, have you considered that this may be the reason or that may be the reason why something happened? So there was a safety net in talking to people who had similar or shared experiences of racism. So for me, I've really started finding my voice. And I'm not going to lie, I am still fearful at times to express my experiences, but I'm learning to lean into that a bit more. And in the process, what I've learned is that people didn't realize that those things happened to me, or that maybe it hit so close to home for them. So it's been an empowering experience throughout this time. Even how I talk about race with my children. And I don't want their history to just start at slavery. It's very important to me that they know that their culture is dynamic and they are great people as well. So those have been some of the biggest changes in my life since COVID.
Thank you, Kendra.
So I'll go next, if that's okay, Fariel. So close to home. I have a 25-year-old daughter. She lives in Washington, D.C. I would almost label her an activist. And when all this started with the demonstrations in Washington, D.C., she was chomping at the bit to get out there. But because she was coming up to visit her mother and I, a few weeks later, she wasn't able to. So that really stifled her ability to speak out. Personally, I am trying to become much more well-informed, and I'm really going out of my way to question the sources of the news that I see. I want to make sure that it's accurate and thorough so that the information that I have is informed. Now, since I am a member of a high-risk category, I can't exactly go out and voice my opinion in traditional ways. So what I'm trying to do now is show support somewhat financially for different organizations. One of my favorite places down in Washington, D.C. is a place called Ben's Chili Bowl. And they have been selling some items online as fundraiser. So I've been buying some of those items, and I've been also looking locally to what minority-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, I can also support in that respect as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. That's funny. I love Ben's Chili Bowl. I also know that place.
It is, by the way, a minority-owned small business, which is why I want to support it.
That's great. Fariel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I had a whole presentation about this, but the only thing I did want to add is similar to what Larry's doing is finding minority-owned businesses and making sure that I am supporting them, because with COVID, I feel like all businesses have been really hit hard. Mm-hmm. So going the extra mile to find one can make a huge difference in making sure that they stay open and they thrive.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I won't be taking the bulk of time answering these questions for myself, but at the end of each question, I might just take a moment to kind of share something that I'm doing too. Since we all are very different in our lived experiences, I think it's important to note, I'm doing a lot of self-reflection and learning as well. As a white man in New Hampshire, I think that we're not necessarily directly exposed to some of these ideas that unless we are going out and seeking these opportunities to learn. And I think the last few months have been an excellent opportunity for us to do so. Lots of reading, lots of learning and group discussion that I've been going through over the last few months myself. So thank you so much. Next question here is, how has the new normal affected the conversations that you're having here at SNU? No pressure.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's been overwhelming in the best way. There have been so many of my colleagues and people I've only seen like their names and emails, but I've never had the opportunity to speak with them one-on-one that have reached out to me personally, and not to apologize for anything. And initially it started off as trying to get new information just to learn. Mm. But what I thrive on and what I'm searching for are true connections with people. So I'm not necessarily trying to be your teacher in every conversation. And I love learning what we have in common, or I also love learning, how other people grew up and some of the things that we have in common, or and our differences. Our differences make us beautiful too. So it's just changed everything. And I feel so empowered just talking about my experiences. And there's this term called code switching.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people are familiar with this, but what it basically is for me as a Black woman, I've just grown up learning how to speak professional in different settings, whereas when I'm at home, I may use different slang or bring up different things. And I realized that was actually hurting me. I think it's very important for me to be my full self, and I should be accepted for my full self, and how I speak, how I act within my culture, and all of those wonderful things, because when I speak to other people, I expect them to be their full selves as well. So it's changed everything in the best way, and I hope that it continues.
That's awesome, Kendra. I should say, I forgot to mention after her first point, but I think it's relevant here too. If you don't follow Kendra, Dr. Kendra Thomas on LinkedIn, her LinkedIn posts have been really enlightening and very positive and informative too, Kendra. So it's nice to see that you're finding your voice and seeing that it's shaping how you interact here at SNU too. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Larry and Fariel, go ahead.
So I would have to say that it's affected the conversations by opening up the conversation, which I really appreciate. I now look at diversity as a value. And when I speak about diversity, yes, I start with age first and generational differences, but diversity goes far beyond in terms of gender, religion, nationality. And what I've learned from a few students that I've been working with, it also has to do with disabilities. Because of those diverse backgrounds, people see the world differently, and that brings value to the table. Yeah. So I appreciate the fact that those conversations are now more apparent, and we are able to have them. It's like we have been given permission to talk about things that have been in the past a little bit, that the big elephant in the corner of the room that it's there, but you don't talk about it. So I'd say that I really, really appreciate that, because I've learned so much. I wanted to mention, Fariel, I loved your presentation, and there was a time in one of my previous lives, I was a personal trainer, and I was training at the same time an Orthodox Jew, a Presbyterian minister, and a person very high up in the Mormon church. And during our training sessions, we would have lots of conversations about religion. And I got to learn so much about the basis of each of the religions. And I would encourage everybody, there's so much to learn about each other when you look at it just from the prism of religion as well. So to be able to learn from you, Fariel, that was wonderful.
Thanks, Larry. So I'm completely in agreement with my panelists that this has really opened the door to discussions, whether it's religion, race, politics. And I think that has always been seen as taboo. Don't talk about that at work, just kind of ignore it, where I feel like we can't ignore it anymore. And we talk about this a lot in the Diversity Council meetings, but being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and being okay with not knowing everything, but being open to learning, supporting your teammates. Whenever I see something from Kendra, I try to text her, give her a shout out, because I am learning. I'm learning from her, I'm learning from everyone. And then my team lead and I, we have a lot of discussions on race, and he inspired me to order the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, which I'm really excited to grow and learn from.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that in addition to the points that have already been made, something that's really interesting that I think we mentioned, the new normal started with this idea of the pandemic being a significant change to our lives. And obviously all of these other things have been folded into the new normal. But one of the most exciting pieces, not that anything from the pandemic has been a directly positive result, but it's that it's evened the playing field for all of us to work with one another in a different way. Larry and I are typically site-based employees at least part of the time, and Fariel and Kendra live on the West Coast. And while we all connect with people all over the country for our jobs at SNU pretty regularly, I do think that the leveling of the playing field between site-based and remote employees has been a really powerful opportunity for us to have these conversations more effectively too. I don't necessarily know that we would have come to these conversations in the same way if we weren't all remote right now. So that's been a powerful shift for me too, is figuring out how to have those conversations over a camera. But I appreciate that. Okay, the next question we've got is, there we go. How have you adapted to those changes to support yourself, your loved ones, and your community? And by that, it can be, let me just say, it can apply broadly to whatever that means to you. What I think we're intending here is, what you think those changes have meant in your local community, so at home. I won't call on.
I've been much more intentional about my outreach, much more intentional within my own household, especially. This COVID has really impacted my household from my children. My youngest son started kindergarten last year. And he was so excited. He was finally able to make friends, and then the world stopped and he was back at home. And we started noticing some behaviors that we needed to correct. And I think it was really out of boredom and just not understanding. So having the talk about COVID, and he was like, I just want to strangle COVID. And I was like, baby, if you touch it, you're going to get it. So I don't think you want that. So just really explaining to him what's been going on and moving to remote learning. A 6-year-old is a challenge in itself. My oldest son is autistic, and structure is very important to him. So it's been an adjustment for him, not having the routine that he had going from class to class in high school. And so he's really clung to his Chromebook and having those Zoom meetings with his teachers and his classmates. So because now my role, I typically travel a lot. All of that stopped in March. I actually had to leave a conference early because of COVID. So being home, on the flip side, finding a positive, I've really just been more intentional about the communication that I have with my kids, with my husband, and even checking into myself and thinking about what I want and what feels good to me, and how to continue to make this space comfortable for all of us. So big changes in the Thomas household.
Yeah. Thank you, Kendra.
You're welcome.
Well, for me, it's being more aware, it's being more careful. I coach 14-year-old baseball with my son. Went to one game, saw how close everybody was, including the parents, and said, I can't do this. So I had to drop out. My son lives at home. I have 4 adult kids, and my third son lives at home. He's a paraprofessional. So back in the spring when schools were from home, my wife is a event director. So we're all have jobs where we're on the phone. So we have to physically manage where are we working from. And we have to talk about our daily schedule, who's going to be on the phone when. I have gone down on Fridays to help with my grandsons because my 2 oldest boys who have their sons and their wives, same situation. They're on calls all day. So sometimes we have to just go in and take the grandsons and move them out. Locally, I live in a condo complex. We've actually gotten much closer with our neighbors, not necessarily physically, but we reach out and ask, is there anything we can do? Do you need anything at the store? A few of the neighbors that we have are on older side. And so we want to support them in any way we can. But it's just really more being aware, admitting that I am high risk, and being careful along those lines.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, so similar to Kendra, it was first kind of explaining to my 4-year-old that you're not going to be able to go back to preschool, which was really interesting because he was over the moon. I don't know why. I joke with my teammates that my son is 4, but he's like he's done with school. So being lenient with his bedtime, because if he sleeps in, I can get more work done. Making sure, being intentional about when I'm off of work, that we go into the backyard, that he's able to run around and get that physical activity. Whereas before it was just he came home from school and he was exhausted, and we kind of read, and he ate dinner and he went to sleep. And then in terms of my local community and my congregation, they actually set up, which I thought was really nice, like a task force in the different neighboring cities of those who could go grocery shopping. So spreading the word to my relatives that are high risk and saying, hey, you can call on this person, they'll pick up your groceries, and they're more than happy to support you. My mom is high risk, so I'm very careful of where I go. A lot of times I'm at home or at her house, and that's kind of it. So it's really shifted, whereas before it was always like going here and there. I've had to really scale back just to make sure that she is safe as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Fariel. Yeah, it's been interesting for me too. I think that it's been interesting for all of us to figure out how we're supporting ourselves, our own physical and mental health, as well as those around us. I'll just say here in New Hampshire that one of the things that I've found really amazing, and I think we've all probably seen in our own communities, are the mutual aid groups that are popping up to make sure that at-risk individuals, whether that means at risk of COVID or at risk of suffering from socioeconomic problems, which they might be facing on the home front now that COVID is so prevalent. It's been really, really empowering to see how involved different communities are becoming to make sure that all of their community members are supported. Larry had mentioned his condo complex a few times to me a couple of months back, and that was one of the most powerful things I'd heard, was actually getting to know your neighbors. This was the first time. I had mentioned living with my in-laws right now, and it's a big suburban neighborhood, and I'm used to living kind of in town, where I knew the people around me, but in the big suburban neighborhood, my in-laws didn't know any of their neighbors, and they've been there for a while. It's just lots of people who are kind of spread out, but this is the first time anybody has been hanging out in their front yards because they were so desperate for some attention outside of their families. And so now I know all my neighbors. They stop by and socially distant comment on each other's gardens and tell everybody what's going on. And we've similarly been able to support each other, which has been really nice. All right, our next question is, what steps, if any, is it going forward? There we go. If any, have you taken to be a positive force for your sphere of influence, given these large changes in your world? So you've already mentioned some of those things, but I am curious to know if there's anything that you would say has been a conscientious decision you've made to positively influence your community or your own spheres of influence. You had such great answers before that if you don't have additional comments, that's okay. Okay. Let's see.
I can go real quick. Yeah, so I had mentioned this before, and I think first is just focusing on starting with myself. Where are my pain points? Where are my opportunities for me to grow and learn, so therefore I can lead by example within my own household and others. And then developing alternative programs for my community and my coworkers, whether it's faith-based, whether it's like free fitness apps. I always try to share free resources I come across. And the last thing is actually providing free career resources to those in need. If I hear of anyone, even on LinkedIn, my team lead knows I always tell them stories where I'll be like, oh, I saw this person, they lost their job, and I messaged them, and just putting it out there because I do have the ability to help, so why not?
Yeah.
I think for me, this has been it's been an overwhelming time for many reasons. At times I felt really drained and exhausted. So when I feel that way, and I don't know if JK is still in this chat, but I was telling her that I was exhausted. Hey, and she was like, you need to take some time. You need to take some time for yourself. And I was like, I will, but I need to wait because blah, 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 work, and But I was able to take that time last week, and it was everything. And I'm doing it again in August. So I think for me, I can't be good for anyone else if I'm not taking care of myself. If I feel like my cup is running low, then I need to do something to fill it up. And for me, filling it up is just not having a schedule, just waking up when I want to. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. every morning now that I'm remote fully. But when I don't set the alarm, I naturally wake up at 8:30, 8:45. I get mad that I still wake up super early, but at least I'm waking up on my own. So just really listening to my body, saying positive affirmations in the morning or whenever I feel like I need them, meditating, praying. Those are the steps that I've taken to just more self-aware of the energy that I'm also giving out. And I think in doing so, when it's time to have deeper conversations or when it's time to really learn or set a goal of learning more about my history, Black history, learning about different religions, thanks, Fariel, I will be fully open and being intentional in those moments.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just add what the others had mentioned, lead by example. Make sure I wear a mask, admit that these things are happening, take out instead of in restaurant type food. But one thing that I've started to do, and this started when my sister sent me the first link to Some Good News with John Krasinski. I started to become a junkie for those, but then I started to share and look for more content online that makes you laugh. That's funny. I was introduced to a girl by the name of Julie Nolke, Nolke, who's got some really funny bits on YouTube. And so as I come across these, I like to share them with people at work. I like to share them with family. So there's a lot of people making light of what's going on and make others laugh, and we might as well enjoy it.
Yeah. Larry, I didn't get a chance to include those. I know you'd mentioned some YouTube channels that you recommended we all consider listening to. So please feel free to add those into the chat. I would love that. I feel like your common sense advice just now should be called like Simple Steps with Larry. And I want to thank everyone. We do have a few more questions that I will make sure we get through. But I want to thank everyone in advance already for also acknowledging that this is pretty tough. On us as individuals. So Kendra, your advice, taking care of yourself to make sure that you're then ready to take care of other people is so important, because especially in the social services and education sector, it's really important to make sure we are there for other people. Our responsibility does not go away. And so taking care of yourself is really important. I think that Fariel also made an excellent point that we should be using the skills that we already have here as professionals to help others. So I've also been doing some resume editing for people who are going through the unemployment process, helping people to file for unemployment, all of that. I'm sure that that's relatable for many folks who are listening into this session today. And it's been really excellent to be able to help using my own skill set, helping people who are typically campus teachers or K-12 teachers in a brick and mortar environment to adapt to the online learning space with some tips on how to engage students early on in the process. That was something that I was spending a lot of time doing. And I'm sure that other folks who have taught here at SNU can relate to that. It's really nice that we had an understanding of what that learning curve looks like before we had to jump into the deep end. And not everybody was so lucky. All right. So this is our call to act, or it kind of is a lead into a call to action. I mentioned there would be one, but this is the panelists' opportunity to give some advice or recommendations that you think the audience might want to consider taking, where we can all work to learn and support one another more effectively in our regular lives. And I would say that applies to lives at home or lives in the workplace, or both, that you think are both inclusive and considerate of others during this time.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
I know that talking about race and conversation, it's a conversation that I've had to have with my children way sooner than I anticipated, because I've wanted to protect their innocence. But if you have children, if you have nieces, if you have nephews, cousins, I think it's important to not only have those discussions with them, but ask them questions about how they feel about certain things regarding race, regarding what's happening in our country right now, what's happening globally, because you want to navigate that space with love and also an open mind. And sometimes we've learned things growing up that aren't the greatest things to pass on to our little ones. And I think if we can correct our own actions and our own biases that we have, or stereotypes that we've learned that aren't true, or they aren't fair, or whatever the case may be, we can really help steer the conversation and guide our children along the right path, so they don't have the same experiences that we've had growing up regarding racial disparities and all of those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Kendra. I'm going to try and write these down so we can send out a follow-up afterwards, if that's possible, Bethany and Jazz. Larry and Fariel.
I'll go back to the word I love to use, learning. And like Kendra said, seeing how other people feel and being neutral and just entertaining the basis of how people feel and why, and try to get an understanding rather than this polarized approach that our society seems to have taken at this time, where you have to believe 100% in one direction or another. I'd like to find the advice I would give is, let's see if we can find somewhere in the middle where we can meet and understand all the different aspects of the argument.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, so I just had two pieces of advice. So the first was making people feel safe. So in situations where you hear someone say something that is not inclusive or prejudiced, then actively saying something to correct that, defend that person who is being marginalized, to make them feel safe. And this can be difficult, especially at work, but it's important to say something. You know, it can make a huge difference, a vast difference. I know in the past, you know, me saying something, I've had people message me privately or talk to me saying, you know, thanking me, whereas I wasn't sure how it was going to come over. Another just really important thing I want to emphasize is listen. Listen to see how the people around you need to feel supported. It's sometimes worse when you kind of lump someone in a group and say, oh, because someone is from this race, this background, this faith, whatever, they need this from me. But people are different. You know, every single person is different. They come from different cultures, religions, and they're an individual. And I personally appreciate it when most people treat me like an individual and don't assume things about me based on any groups I'm affiliated with, how I dress or look. Just really the best way to support is to listen and don't assume that you know everything.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think those are all really powerful points. And I'm really, really excited to hear more of these coming up over the coming months, not just from our three panelists, but from all of our colleagues who are listening in today, both on the Diversity Council and more widely here at SNHU. I want to echo Fariel's thoughts of, you know, making people feel safe and being an ally, because I do think it encompasses what Kendra and Larry also mentioned. You know, it can be really uncomfortable. I think it's safe to say it is really uncomfortable for folks who are not used to having these conversations to have them. I think it's also safe to say that it's worthwhile leaning into that discomfort to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling that way. And I'm speaking from a personal place here rather than generalizing, and making sure that that way you're prepared to be an ally when that opportunity arises. And it comes up a lot. So just stay tuned, keep listening to yourself and listen to your heart when those opportunities pop up, and see, you know, if you're unsure how to address it, talking with your friends who you know to be effective allies is a great way to start, you know, building those bridges and alliances here at SNHU, and obviously in the wider world. So we're beginning to close out. We've got some time left though for Q&A. So I'd love to open up the floor for folks who have asked questions in the chat to ask those. We've got 11 more minutes and I will be quiet now and let folks chat, and I'll see if there's any questions in there. But feel free to come off mute too. I'm scrolling back and I'm not seeing any questions yet.
Thanks, Ted.
There was a question, Dan, from
you.
Benjamin Bullock. Faria, are you planning on leading the virtual recipe event next year if things return to normal?
We'll see what happens. I do have a collection. I remember Scott said in a meeting, and I really appreciated this before Ramadan, is that he's traveling through his palette, and I really feel like I did that during the month of Ramadan. So I do have a collection I'd be happy to share.
I love that. I love that. A donation jar is starting. That's fantastic. Ooh, and what is the first thing you want to do post-COVID? What a fun question, panelists.
I have two things I want to do. The first thing I want to do is go into a bookstore and touch the books. I know things are open here, but it doesn't feel good yet to go out. I don't feel free outside. And I also want to go to a record shop and just sift through the albums and pick out things. That's really what I would like to do once everything is back to normal.
I will add two things. I want to go to the gym, and I also want to go to a grocery store and not have to put something in my cart and be able to pick something up and put it back down, like an avocado.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I want to go to the spa. I just want to take a day just to rest, relax, and then also support them. I think, again, they were another business that were really hard to hit, and they can't, at least in California, they're not open at this time.
Ooh, I love all of those. I think because I've been feeling the isolation, I just want to stand in a crowd. Before we go too far up, I'm seeing a question that I thought was excellent is beyond, I will read it verbatim, beyond showing up, shutting up, listening, learning, donating, and voting, is there a tangible thing that I could do this week to create an impact? And that's a good leaning because it's going to be our call to action here for folks to think about. Panelists, what do you think? Are there any solid, actionable things you'd recommend folks do?
Make a connection with someone who is different from you.
Great advice, Kendra. I'm going to take this from Dan's playbook. Dan, sorry to put you on the spot, but I really liked that he said he's part of a book club where they're reading books on race. So I would really recommend, why not do the same? For those of you who get PD funds, we get $1,000 a year. I got a stack of books I highly recommend this year. Make it the year to learn about topics you're unfamiliar with or that challenge you, or you may be too shy to ask someone. Read about it and make a book club with your local friends or community.
Yeah, thank you, Fariel. I'll actually put, because I'm trying to start one here at SNU, this is a list of potential resources so that if you're curious, and I did try and categorize them by topic, not for this conversation, but there are some really excellent ones, primarily centered around race, oppression, systemic oppression, and socioeconomic inequity. There's some pretty interesting ones on there. There's also a couple podcasts and videos. So feel free to check that out. That's just my personal list, though. Larry, how about you?
I go back to learning and understanding. The more that we can learn, the more uncomfortable we are, the more we're growing. And when I say learning, again, I try to learn as much as I can from all kinds of different people again, I'm trying to learn more about how much diversity brings value to the table.
Yeah.
In terms of our lives, in terms of a person's value, in terms of how we operate, with our coworkers.
Can I add one more thing? I love reading, but one thing I was thinking was for people who watch TV and who watch movies, a lot of times we get comfortable watching something where we can see ourselves, right? And over the last, or forever, I'll say, there have been movies that have been created that show a poor stereotype of upbringings of Black people. And I would encourage you all to step outside of your comfort zone and watch movies that are created by people of color that don't reflect those negative stereotypes, that just, they're movies about nothing, even if they're romantic comedies. So for example, like The Photograph is a love story, and it stars Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield. So you can see that we're also human, that we experience the highs and lows of love and joy and laughter and pain, because sometimes we are presented very poorly on television, and it's not a true reflection of who we are.
That's awesome, Kendra. I added that to my Google Doc to watch that movie. Yeah, I think that those are all excellent recommendations. In addition, I do think that to reading and listening and learning, I think one of the panelists did say it, but I would say, check in on your neighbor, because that is part of the new normal, right? Is that we are more isolated and connected in different ways, but find somebody who you might not otherwise have spoken to this week that you think might be lonely or at risk, or it just in need of a listen, and check in on them to make sure they're doing well. And that can be somebody who's different from you, but it also could be the person next door, because you don't know if they're different from you too. And those things can make a big difference, especially as we're also focusing not just on like societal health, but our mental health too. It's a complicated time. All right, we've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly cycle through some of these remaining questions here, just to let you know that if we don't address them today, we will make sure that they get addressed at some point, which is whether or not there's a regular training. Bethany has mentioned that the Diversity Council does do monthly events, which is excellent. And if you are really interested in learning more about some of the trainings outside of SNU, there are some really good learning opportunities. You can check out that Google Doc just for reading purposes, but I highly recommend finding a book club or a group that's actively discussing racial inequity. They're pretty powerful as long as you're willing to lean into that discomfort and knowing that you're probably going to feel that, especially if you're a white person who hasn't spent a lot of time discussing it in the past. But it's a worthwhile conversation because it's going to grow your mental capacity for supporting other people. And that's really important here in society. But again, here it's new. I'm not seeing any unanswered questions. So I have a final call to action before people head out for their meeting. And that's thank you, everybody. But again, consider what has been changed in your own lives in the recent months due to all of the seismic shifts that we've had. And think about those 1 to 2 actionable things that you can do, even if it wasn't covered here today, that you think you might be able to do to better support other people in your own sphere of influence. And that might be as an education professional here at SNU, because no matter what you do, your role directly impacts the lives of students, whether or not it feels that way every day. Try and think about it in that context here at work, and then think more broadly about what you can do to support people in your community. I think that's a really important thing. 1 to 2 actionable things you can do in the next couple of weeks would be great. And then if you've got questions, contact any of us. Our emails are there. We're all more than happy to talk. I did make sure to check in with these panelists before listing their emails, so they truly are all happy to chat with you. And I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, so I'm really excited to keep working with each of you. I know that Jazz has just put in a Qualtrics survey for the Diversity Council. Please enter that in for feedback. Jazz, and Bethany, do either of you have any closing remarks?
My only closing remark is to thank you as well as the panelists for you guys' comments, suggestions, and just sharing your stories. And everyone who attended the event, we really appreciate it on behalf of the Diversity Council. We enjoy this work. We enjoy being able to build a platform in which we can be diverse in what we have to say. Please complete our survey. Give us feedback. Our programming is evolving. doing within the current landscape that we're in. And so we constantly like ideas and like to put things to fruition based on the ideas of our audiences. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. A big hearty thanks to our panelists and to Dan and everyone on the Diversity Council. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at diversitycouncil@snhu.edu. You can reach out to me as well or to Jazz, but the Diversity Council email is our general email.
Yeah. And if you're still listening, talk to Bethany and Jazz about joining the Diversity Council, because we're always looking for new members each year. We're trying to find people who are interested in joining. And Bethany and Jazz will have information about when that might happen and how to be more involved. Oh, I'll make sure to add that link in, Carly, one more time. Hold on one second. And then I think that we're all set for the day here. But here's that link one more time. It's just my personal Google Doc. Thanks, Carly, for checking in there. Okay, well, thank you so much again to our panelists and to the whole audience. It's so powerful to be able to discuss these things with you. And hopefully we'll have chances to do this again in the coming months while we focus on equity and DEI. Oh, I'm seeing it pop up in the chat. I'll make sure that the link gets distributed from Jazz and Bethany if you're not seeing it, Carly. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right, bye everyone.